Hi girls, it's Miss Gaska. Today I'm going to go over English 3 Semester 1, Week 1, Activity 1.2, defining a word, idea, or concept. Our learning target is to identify the use of exemplification to define the concept of patriot. Exemplification, the word basically means using examples, so it's when you use examples to define a word. Over here, it shows our learning strategies to be close reading, marking the text, and graphic organizer. As for your independent reading plan, you're going to be choosing a book to read about a topic that you're interested in, and these are the questions you need to consider when you're choosing a book. One is, how do you go about choosing what to read independently? Where can you find advice on which books or articles to read? So you need to think about who is an expert in the subject of books and reading, and ask that person for advice if you need it on choosing which book to read. What genres of text do you enjoy reading outside of class? Now, I know you might be thinking, well, I don't like to read outside of class at all. So what genres do you like if you had to choose? And if you don't know what a book genre is, go to Google, type it in, and see what pops up. So you'll find that there are tons and tons of different genres, as well as examples that go along with them. And then last but not least, how can you make time in your schedule to read independently? Now, you may be like, I don't have any time to read independently, I'm not going to read, blah, blah, blah. Reading is kind of like exercising for your brain. So even though you may not like to exercise necessarily, it's good for your body and it helps your body survive in the long run. Well, it's the same thing for your brain when you read. When you read, it causes you to think, and making sure that you're learning new stuff and thinking about different things actually causes your brain to grow, and it also makes it harder for it to start to get bad when you get older. So it's also kind of akin to eating vegetables. A lot of people don't like eating vegetables. I know I used to be one of them. But you have to eat them anyway if you want to grow strong. It's the same thing for reading. You have to read if you want your brain to grow strong. So I want you to try to find 30 minutes a day to read. 30 may seem like a lot right now, and I understand that. So start off with 10 and push yourself to add a little bit more time each day. Or if you need to, you could separate the 30 into 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 10 minutes there, and read 3 times a day, but only for 10 minutes each. Or you could separate it into groups of 5 minutes and read 6 times a day, 5 minutes each. That could be while you're waiting for a friend to text you back. It could be while you are going somewhere on the bus or in a car. There are lots of opportunities where we could read for 5 minutes. So, extended definitions. Some complex terms and concepts are best understood through extended definitions. Extended definitions can begin simply with synonyms and formal definitions. So you probably already know what synonyms are, but it doesn't hurt to refresh. They're basically words that have a similar meaning to the word being defined, but sometimes they might have slightly different connotations, so that they provide clarity and nuance to understanding. What that means is that using a specific word for its connotation can give an additional reader a little bit more insight about what the writer means. So if I said, I smell something, it's kind of vague. Well, do I smell something pleasant? Do I smell something unpleasant? Do I smell smoke? Do I smell cake baking in the oven? Like, what do I smell? If I want to use a synonym, I could say something like, what's that odor? Now that implies that I'm smelling something negative, like body odor, right? What's that odor? Or what's that stench? That also implies something negative. Or I could say, what's that aroma? Meaning, I smell something nice, I smell something positive. Or, what's that fragrance? These are all examples of the word smell put into different synonyms that have their own connotations, okay? They could have a negative connotation, a neutral connotation, or a positive connotation, okay? Some words can get even more deep, like a connotation of happiness or a connotation of nostalgia. But we're just going to stick with the simple negative, positive, neutral for now. So synonyms for the word patriotism are nationalism, partisanship, or devotion. Now you may not know what some of those words mean, and that's okay. I'm sure that they're going to go over it in the unit. Formal definitions are succinct examples, explanations of a word or concept often found in a dictionary or glossary. So formal definitions identify words and concepts in 3 parts: word, class, and characteristics. So when you're doing those things, I wanted to tell you that the word succinct, by the way, means short and to the point. So formal definitions are like the short, to the point version of what the word means. And so it's separated into these three things: word, class, characteristics. Patriotism, love or devotion, and for one's country. So extended definitions identify words or concepts using strategies to demonstrate a variety of ways the word or concept may be defined. Extended definitions are useful for providing a complete definition of a word, concept, or idea. So for a word as complex as patriotism, providing a synonym and definition from a dictionary does not always offer enough depth. You could extend any definition in a variety of ways, and I really want you to try to remember these ways. There's exemplification, which is giving examples. There's function, which is explaining how it works. There's classification, which puts it into categories. And then there's negation, which explains the opposite of it, what it is not. So I'm going to give you a little mnemonic device to help you remember what's what. Exemplification starts with EX. So it means examples. All right? Functions show how something functions. So, you know, functions, when something's functional, it means it works. When it's dysfunctional, it means it doesn't work. Classification. Think about how your classes are divided into categories. You have math as a category, science as a category, English, history, etc. So, just like your classes are different categories, classification is categorizing something. And then we have negation, which starts with the same letters as negative. And the negative of something is the opposite. So that's just an example of how you could remember these words. They're going to be in your exam review, so you're going to want to remember them. So definition by exemplification. Successful extended definitions go beyond dictionary definitions to show the writer's personal understanding of a concept. So to extend a definition, writers use a variety of strategies. One definition strategy is to define by example, which is showing specific, relevant examples that fits with the writer's definition. So, in this activity, we are going to be reading an essay by John McCain that serves as an extended definition of the word patriot. Now we have the setting a purpose for learning section. In this section, this is the most important part of the entire springboard because it's the part that explains what you need to look for while you're reading. I always want to point out the setting a purpose for reading. So the first thing it wants you to do is underline phrases that exemplify the author's definition of patriot. The second thing we're going to need to do is circle unknown words and phrases. Try to determine the meaning of the words by using context clues, word parts, or a dictionary. Here's a little bit about John McCain. So as we read this essay, I'm going to read the first 3 paragraphs with you and show you what I would underline, what I would circle, etc. Then you're responsible for doing the rest of the essay, and then you can come back to me and we'll do the questions, or I'll explain the questions to you to help you find the answers. So to begin with, let me tell you what I think about our Pledge of Allegiance, our flag, and our country. I want to tell you about when I was a prisoner of war. I spent 5 years in the Hanoi Hilton. In the early years of our imprisonment, the North Vietnamese kept us in solitary confinement for 2 or 3 to a cell. In 1971, the North Vietnamese moved us from these conditions of isolation into large rooms with as many as 30 to 40 men to a room. This was, as you can imagine, a wonderful change, and a direct result of the efforts of millions of Americans, led by Nancy and Ronald Reagan on behalf of a few hundred POWs 10,000 miles from home. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to tell you what I would be underlining and circling. First of all, I'm looking for things that show something about patriotism. So I think that here where he says our Pledge of Allegiance, our flag, and our country, he's showing the unity of the United States, which is one of the keys of patriotism in my opinion. It's something what we could all stand together to support the country, would be kind of like patriotism. Now, you may not know what it means to be a prisoner of war, so you might want to circle that concept if you don't, also called a POW. It's when the opposite side captures one of our people and makes them a prisoner. So then he says he still spent 5 years in Hilton and early years of our imprisonment, solitary confinement. You probably already know what solitary confinement is, but if you don't, you might want to look that up or make a guess to what it means based on the context clues. Then it says that they were moved to a room with many more people in it, and it was a wonderful change. And then he says it's a direct result of the efforts of millions of Americans, led by people like Nancy and Ronald Reagan on behalf of a few hundred POWs 10,000 miles from home. So I think this kind of shows patriotism because it shows that even though it's only a few hundred POWs, the people in America, the millions and millions of people, were supporting the POWs. So it demonstrates how, as Americans, our patriotism causes us to want to support people who belong to the same group as us, even though they're so far away. It's kind of like when you have your family's back for something or have your friends back. So now we're going to skip forward to the questions. Like I said, you need to make sure you finish annotating the rest of this essay before you go to the questions. But once you're done with that and you get to these questions, I can give you a little bit of guidelines as to how to answer them. So the first one says, using details from paragraphs 4 to 5, what inference can you make about how McCain feels about Mike Christian? So for this part, you're going to go back to paragraphs 4 or 5 and look at the words he uses to describe Mike Christian. You're trying to look for how he feels about them. Use specific details, make sure you cite them and quote them that kind of show you how McCain feels about Mike Christian. It's not going to straight up say, like, I loved Mike Christian. It's going to imply it. You have to look for those words that kind of hint to you that he likes Mike Christian or doesn't like Mike Christian. So number 2 says in paragraph 14, McCain changes the noun pledge of allegiance to a verb, pledge our allegiance. How does the connotation change when he does this? So he changes it from the Pledge of Allegiance to pledge our allegiance. I personally think that he is kind of introducing a feeling of ownership over this. Find a way that you think that the connotation changes and then put that in a sentence and then you can support that. Number 3 is what's McCain's definition of a patriot? So you're also going to use details from the text in order to create a definition of patriotism or a patriot that McCain would likely agree with based on what you read. So checking your understanding says create a list of words and phrases that exemplify the concept of patriot. So you might want to go back to the reading and just pinpoint words or phrases that stand out to you as being exemplary of a patriot. Last but not least, it says McCain's essay is an extended definition of the word patriot. Write a brief response that explains how this extended definition has impacted your own understanding of the word. Begin with a clear thesis that explains the new understanding of the word, include transitions between points, and include a statement that provides a conclusion. So this only has to be a few sentences, maybe 3 or 4 sentences, and then that should be the end. I will see you in the next video for activity 1.3. I hope this was helpful, but if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I will be happy to answer them for you. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.